So I've been very silent about my 2D Metroidvania summit in the last months, mainly due to the fact that I started working full-time on my AR piano learning app Magic Keys, which has been my focus since the end of last year. However, that does not mean I have abandoned Summit. That would be a shame considering how much effort I've put into it and how close I am to the finish line. So to push the game one step further to completion, I decided to join the upcoming Steam Next Fest in June, where Steam puts upcoming indie games and their demos in the spotlight. Luckily I was accepted to participate, and I'm really excited to finally release a public demo on Steam, and also for the live streams during Steam Next, where I will casually play through the demo and talk about or answer questions about the game. Alright, it's been a while since my last devlog on Summit, so let's talk a little bit about development. As I said, progress has stagnated a little over the last year due to my focus on Magic Keys and before that my full-time job at an indie game studio. If I would plot progress over time since I've started working on the game, it would probably look something like that. Hopefully it wouldn't have been that dramatic if I had completely focused on the game since the start, but I'd say even then the graph would probably have looked somewhat similar. It's just the way projects work. In hindsight, I wish I kept the scope of the game way smaller, like maybe a third, and really focus on that part, but hey, guess I'm not the first one with that problem. This is my first large-scale game project aside from several mobile games and game jam entries, and it's gonna be close to 15 hours of gameplay. The demo alone turned out to be over 5 hours, which for a solo project platformer is pretty big, I would imagine. And I'm really proud of that scope, but I just had and still have to make a lot of compromises for the sake of finishing the game in a reasonable amount of time. To be honest, I much prefer to finish the game now and accept all the things I could have done better with my current skills or with more time, rather than reworking every aspect of the game like 10 times, only to abandon the project altogether after like 7 years in the making. So let's dive a little bit deeper into a few things I've worked on to prepare for the demo release. Spoiler alert, these may not be quite as exciting as in my previous devlogs where I added new content most of the time, but hey, looks like that's the reality of bringing a game towards release. One thing that was long overdue was to switch to Unity's new input system. Even though it's been around for many years, it still hasn't fully replaced the old system yet, and it feels like many of the Unity resources and tutorials you find online still use the old input system. It's also kinda hard to find fully working best practice setups of the new input system, especially with good code architecture. So it wasn't quite as easy and straightforward as I expected, but I'm confident that I now have a good and clean solution that I can hopefully transition to every new project I'll be starting. By the way, the main reason I switched was controller support. With the old system there really was no good way to support different controller types, at least not without the use of a third-party plugin. You could add controller bindings in the famous input manager list, using Alt positive button for instance, provided you found out about the binding strings for your specific controller. But these bindings are not standardized. The PlayStation controller's triangle is not the same as the Xbox controller's Y, even though they should be. Now compared to that, the new input system is a godsend. You get all the input bindings for common controllers out of the box, and the system switches seamlessly from one input method to another. With a little additional coding, I've implemented a system that connects the respective icons in the UI with the new input system. So now I can switch between keyboard, PS4 controller and Xbox controller as often as I want, and the game immediately updates the control scheme and also the UI icons. I went through the level design and tried to spot areas that felt rather empty compared to the rest of the world. One thing I noticed is the lack of near background layers. In a previous devlog I've talked about how, due to the vertical nature of my world, the design of distant backgrounds was pretty tricky, so I put most of the backgrounds very far away. However, as a result, the background felt very static when moving around short distances. so I decided to add a few more near background layers here and there to fill up the empty and static areas. There are just so many small details when you're getting towards the release of a game. It's almost impossible to keep track, especially as a solo dev. As I've mentioned before, during this time you constantly have to make small decisions on what is important to fix and what is out of scope for now or potentially forever. That having said, I'm still rather confident with the current stability of the game. There might be a few quirky things happening here and there, especially if a player is really set on finding and forcing them, but I think a certain level of unpredictability is going to remain in a game of that scope, and I'm actually kinda curious about what players will find. I'm really looking forward to the Steam Next Fest. My dream would be to get a decent number of players trying my demo of Summit and receiving a good amount of feedback. So far the amount of feedback has been rather small, so that would definitely help me tell where I stand with the game, whether I'm on the right track to a cool game or whether it completely sucks. Either way, I will persevere and fully release the game on Steam as soon as possible. As I said, for my first major game, I'm really proud of the scope, and I think every second that I invested in the development was totally worth it. If you're interested in a brand new 2D Metroidvania, you can check out the free demo on Steam. And of course, I would appreciate if you'd stop by during the Steam Next Fest. I will probably do my first live stream on June 13th, so right on the opening day of the festival. Alright, have fun creating and see you!